When my father passed away, it felt like the world around me stopped moving. The house that once echoed with his laughter suddenly became painfully silent. Every corner still carried his presence, the faint smell of his cologne, the half-read newspaper by his chair, and the old clock ticking on the wall, counting moments I wished I could get back. He wasn't just my father. He was my compass, my safe place, the only person who believed I could do something meaningful with my life. But death doesn't wait for anyone. And when he was gone, I thought at least his final wishes would bring us some peace. I was wrong. The day of the will reading arrived on a gray morning. Rain tapped softly against the window as I sat across from my stepmother, Diane. She wore black, but not grief. Her expression was sharp, distant, like she was counting minutes, not memories. We hadn't spoken much since the funeral. Every word between us felt rehearsed. The lawyer, an older man named Mr. Harris, sat between us with a stack of papers that looked heavier than the air in that room. He cleared his throat. According to Mr. Walker's final testament, he began, the family estate, including the house, land, and savings, is to be distributed as follows. My pulse quickened. He read on, line by line, until he reached the words that made Diane's jaw tighten. The family house located at Maplewood Lane shall belong solely to my son Daniel. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the clock. Her eyes darted toward me, sharp, cold, burning with disbelief. I didn't know whether to smile or cry. That house wasn't just walls and bricks. It was everything Dad had built from nothing. His dream, his pride, his legacy. When the meeting ended, Diane stood up abruptly. Her voice, calm yet edged with poison, cut through the silence. Congratulations, she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I suppose your father always had a soft spot for you. I wanted to respond, but the words got stuck in my throat. There was something in her tone, something that didn't sound like acceptance. That night, as I walked through the house, I couldn't shake off the unease. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of the wind outside felt different. Like the house itself knew something I didn't. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Diane kept to herself, moving through the halls like a shadow. Sometimes I'd find her in Dad's study, staring at his desk, pretending to sort papers. Other times I'd hear her whispering on the phone, the moment I stepped closer. Silence. One night I caught her standing outside the master bedroom, holding a folder close to her chest. When she noticed me, she smiled. That same brittle, practiced smile. Just old documents, she said. But I could tell. She was lying. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was just grief playing tricks on me. But something inside whispered otherwise. A quiet instinct I'd learned from Dad. He once told me, Daniel, when people show you who they are, don't wait for the second time to believe them. And that sentence kept ringing in my head every time Diane looked at me with those hollow eyes. A week later, I met Mr. Harris again to sign the transfer documents. He handed me an envelope, sealed, with my name written in Dad's handwriting. Your father asked me to give this to you personally, he said. He didn't tell me what was inside, but he said you'd understand. When the time comes. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short note. Just a few words. If you're reading this, it means things didn't go as planned. Trust what I taught you. And remember, I never leave loose ends. I stared at those words for a long time. Didn't go as planned. What did he mean by that? And what loose ends? I folded the note and kept it in my wallet. At that moment, I didn't realize how important those words would become. Days turned into weeks. The pain of losing Dad began to dull, until one morning, I came home from work and saw a for sale sign planted in front of the house. I froze. My name was on the deed. The house was legally mine. Yet there it was, bold red letters waving like a cruel joke. Diane stepped out of the doorway, arms crossed, wearing that same smile again. Oh, Daniel, she said almost sweetly. You'll thank me later. This house is too much for you to handle. I felt the ground shift beneath me. She wasn't just being manipulative. She was taking it all. That night, I sat in Dad's old study staring at the empty walls. I opened his note again, reading it under the dim light. I never leave loose ends. And for the first time, those words didn't sound like comfort. They sounded like a message. A warning, maybe even a plan. I didn't know it then, but my father had prepared for this moment long before he took his last breath. And soon I would uncover the secret that would turn Diane's world upside down. After finding that note, sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice, calm, reassuring, and filled with that quiet confidence only he had. It's strange how grief works. Sometimes it's loud, a storm that drowns every thought. Other times it's quiet, just a whisper in the dark reminding you of what's gone. That night it was both. I sat in my father's old study again, the air thick with memories. His desk lamp still worked, the same golden light he used when reading late into the night. I ran my fingers over the wood, tracing the scratches and faint coffee stains like they were a map of his life. That's when I noticed something I'd never seen before, a small carving near the edge. Faint, almost invisible under the polish. It read, "Keep your promise." I froze. It was his handwriting, no doubt about it. But what promise? And that's when the memories started to come back. It was a summer evening, maybe a year before he died. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. He had that quiet look he always wore when he was thinking deeply, the one that meant he was about to say something important. "You know, Daniel," he said softly, "people always show their true faces when money is on the table." I laughed then, thinking he was just talking about business again. He smiled too, but there was a sadness behind it. "Promise me something," he continued. "If life ever forces you to choose between what's easy and what's right, choose right, even if you have to stand alone." I remember nodding, not realizing how much those words would mean later. He placed his hand on my shoulder, firm but gentle. "And one more thing," he added. "Don't ever let greed blind your kindness. It's the quickest way to lose yourself." At that moment, I didn't know he was preparing me for Diane. She entered our lives when I was 17. I still remember the first day I met her, elegant, polite, and impossibly charming. Dad seemed happier, and I wanted that for him. But deep down, something about her smile always felt rehearsed. Still, Dad loved her. And when he loved, he gave everything. Over time, she began to take control of things, little by little. Finances, meetings, even the house staff started reporting to her. Dad didn't seem to mind, but I could see how it wore him down. One night I overheard them arguing, her voice sharp, his calm but tired. "You're too trusting, Charles," she snapped. "Not everyone deserves what you've built." "Trust is all I have left," he replied. "If I lose that, what's the point?" Then there was silence, followed by the sound of something breaking. That was the first time I saw fear in his eyes. Not of her, but of what she might become. After that night, he started locking his study door. He met with his lawyer more often, and I noticed files disappearing from his office. When I asked, he just smiled and said, "Sometimes, Daniel, the best protection isn't what you tell people, it's what you don't." That line, I didn't understand it then, but now, sitting in his empty study, it echoed in my mind like a warning from the past. He must have known she'd try something. He must have seen it coming. A few weeks before he passed, we had one of our last real conversations. Knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Something big was coming. Something that would expose her completely. And for the first time since my father's death, I wasn't afraid anymore. It should have been a normal morning. The sun rose over Maplewood Lane, spilling light across the lawn that my father had built with his hands, yet the warmth felt hollow. I walked toward the house, coffee in hand, ready to go through the day as usual. But something in the air was wrong. A subtle shift, like the calm before a storm. The moment I stepped onto the porch, I saw it. A bright red "Sold" sign planted firmly in the front yard. My stomach dropped. Every heartbeat seemed to echo in my chest. I stared at the letters, trying to convince myself it was a mistake. Maybe it was someone else's house. Maybe the paperwork was wrong. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I pushed open the front door, my hands trembling. The familiar scent of my father's house, the oak, the old books, his faint aftershave lingering in the air, felt like it was suffocating me. And then I saw her. Diane. She was standing by the staircase, holding a cup of tea as if nothing had happened. Her posture was casual, her smile perfectly practiced. But her eyes, they were sharp, almost predatory. "Morning, Daniel," she said lightly. "Did you see the sign outside?" I felt my hands clench into fists. "Yes," I said through gritted teeth. "Why is it there? Did you sell the house?" She tilted her head, feigning surprise. "Oh, I thought you knew. I handled everything with the lawyer. It's all above board." Above board. The words tasted like poison in my mouth. She had taken something that belonged to me, to Dad, and made it disappear as easily as a shadow at sunset. You can't do that," I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to stay calm.
"Why not?"
she replied, voice dripping with false innocence. "It was my decision too. I thought it was best for everyone." I couldn't move. Everything Dad had built, everything he had poured his soul into, was gone. And the person I trusted to care for his legacy had betrayed me in the most complete way imaginable. I walked through the empty halls, touching the walls, the doors, the floors. Everything felt foreign. It wasn't just a house. It was memories. It was Dad, and now it was gone. I sat in the study for hours, staring at the empty desk, the papers, the folders I had uncovered before. The reality settled like a heavy stone in my chest. Diane had not only betrayed me, she had tried to erase my father's presence, his vision, his love. Anger bubbled up inside me. I wanted to scream, to shout, to throw something across the room. But it didn't help. The house was sold. The keys were gone. The papers were gone. Everything tangible that tied me to my father was slipping through my fingers. And yet, that note he left me kept replaying in my mind. I never leave loose ends. I remembered the key around my neck, the secret folder, the backup plan Dad had hidden. At first it felt cruel, like a tease from someone who knew the future I couldn't yet see. But slowly, a sense of clarity began to form. Dad had anticipated betrayal. Dad had prepared for greed, and Dad had trusted me to finish what he started. I wasn't powerless, not yet. Diane didn't make it easy. She acted as if she had won, moving through the house with casual grace, rearranging furniture, pretending like she belonged in the place she had stolen from me. "You're holding on to the past, Daniel," she said one evening. "Your father would have wanted you to move on." "Move on?" I wanted to laugh, but it was hollow. Move on? How do you move on from betrayal so complete, from someone you trusted destroying the life you were meant to inherit? I felt a wave of helplessness crash over me. The walls that once made me feel safe now seemed like a cage. Everything I loved, everything I remembered about Dad felt just out of reach. But in that helplessness, a spark began to form. I went back to the metal box Dad had left me, the folder, the letters, the flash drive. I pored over every single document again, reading his handwriting, his instructions, his hidden contingencies. And there it was. A loophole Diane hadn't noticed. A clause buried deep in the legal language. The house couldn't be fully transferred without my explicit approval. A slow, cold smile crept across my face. She thought she had won. She thought she had erased everything Dad left me. But she hadn't counted on one thing. Me. That night, I walked through the empty rooms once more. I could hear Dad's voice in the silence, guiding me. "Remember, Daniel, patience is the weapon of the wise." Every memory, every lesson, every promise he had made echoed louder than Diane's lies. And for the first time since the house was sold, I didn't feel entirely helpless. I realized that betrayal, while painful, could be turned into a tool. Diane's confidence, her smugness, her belief that she had won, it all became a weakness she didn't even know she had. I wasn't just mourning the loss of the house anymore. I was preparing for the moment when the truth would hit, when Dad's plan would unfold, and Diane would finally realize she had been outsmarted from the very beginning. I spent that night drafting my own plan, guided by Dad's letters and the hidden files. I marked every step Diane had taken, every move she thought was hidden from me. And then I waited, because I knew something important. Patience was part of the game. Let her think she had everything. Let her believe she was untouchable. Soon, very soon, she would discover that the house she stole, the legacy she tried to erase, was never truly hers to take. And when that moment came, the betrayal she thought she got away with would come crashing down around her. The days after the sale felt like living under a cloud of shadows. Every glance at Diane reminded me of betrayal. Every word she spoke felt like salt on an open wound. I wandered the empty rooms of the house late at night, searching for something, anything, that could anchor me to Dad's presence. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was a gnawing need for answers. And then I saw it. It was tucked between two old books on the bottom shelf of Dad's study. A slim envelope, yellowed at the edges, with my name written in Dad's unmistakable handwriting. Daniel, if you are reading this, it means she has betrayed both of us. My hands shook as I picked it up. A turning point. A pivot between despair and hope. I sank into Dad's leather chair, carefully opening the envelope. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper. It was precise, deliberate, every word measured. My son, I foresaw this day. Diane believes she can take what isn't hers, but she doesn't know that I've prepared. You are the key to ensuring that justice is done. Trust what I've taught you. Keep your promise. I froze. A key? Justice? Promise? Everything he had said before, about patience, about observing, about standing alone when necessary. It all made sense now. He wasn't just warning me. He was preparing me for action. There was more. Another paragraph revealed the location of a small hidden box, the one I had found earlier but hadn't realized was part of a larger plan. Inside the box, you will find everything you need to protect what is rightfully yours. Documents, accounts, instructions, all of it. Diane thinks she is clever, but she has underestimated both of us. I stared at the words, feeling a mix of shock, relief, and determination. Dad had thought this through. Every eventuality, every betrayal. And now I had the tools to turn the tide. The letter also included instructions for contacting a lawyer he trusted, Mr. Harris, and a series of steps to verify and reclaim what she had tried to steal. Do not confront her directly yet. Let her believe she is in control. Timing is everything. Daniel, remember, anger is your enemy. Patience is your weapon. Patience. I had never understood the weight of that word until now. For the first time since Dad's death, I felt a flicker of control. I wasn't just a victim of her betrayal. I was a participant in his plan. That night, I retraced every memory of Dad's teachings. His warnings about greed, his lessons about observing people. The countless times he said, Daniel, when people show you who they are, believe them. Always. Each phrase in the letter resonated like a bell. I realized that Diane had been revealing her true nature all along, and Dad had already accounted for it. I was not stepping into the unknown. I was following a trail he had laid for me. I kept the letter close, rereading it again and again, searching for hidden meanings, for subtle clues I might have missed. Every line felt like a breadcrumb leading to a larger truth. And then I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a faint watermark on the paper. It was a symbol, small and intricate, of our family crest. Below it, written in barely legible ink, when she believes victory is hers, the house will speak the truth. The house would speak the truth. I didn't know how yet, but I knew my father had designed a mechanism, some clever, silent way to expose Diane for what she had done. And I was holding the key, both literally and figuratively, to making it happen. Over the next few days, I began preparing. I reviewed the documents in the hidden box, cross-referencing every file, every account, every legal clause. It was meticulous work, but I didn't mind. Each discovery made me feel closer to Dad, as if he was sitting beside me, guiding my hands. I found emails Diane had overlooked, contracts she assumed she had handled, and even recordings of her signing documents under false pretenses. Every piece added to the puzzle, every overlooked detail a stepping stone toward exposing her. It became clear to me that Dad's backup plan wasn't just about reclaiming the house. It was about proving the truth, about making justice inevitable. Late one night, I sat in the study, the rain tapping against the window, and read the letter aloud. Daniel, you may feel anger and loss. That is natural. But remember, the goal is not revenge, it is justice. Let her reveal herself through her own choices. The truth will always come out if you wait. I closed my eyes, imagining Dad's face. His calm, confident eyes, the quiet smile that said, I've prepared for everything. You just have to trust me. That's when it hit me. The next step wasn't confrontation. It was observation. It was letting Diane believe she had won, all while silently preparing for the moment when she would expose herself. The house, once a symbol of betrayal and loss, had become my battlefield. And the letter, simple, handwritten, yet profound, had become my guide. I knew this. The game had changed. I wasn't just the son left behind. I was the son entrusted with a plan, a promise, and the power to see justice done. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel helpless. I felt ready. And I knew Diane would soon discover, too late, that she had been outsmarted from the very beginning. The rain had just stopped when I decided to visit Mr. Harris, my father's old lawyer. I wasn't sure what I expected: guidance, advice, reassurance. What I got was something far more powerful: clarity. The office smelled of aged paper and polished wood, the kind of place where every object seemed to hold a story. Mr. Harris was waiting behind his desk, glasses perched on the edge of his nose, his hands folded calmly. When he saw me, his eyes softened. "Daniel," he said quietly, "your father spoke of this day more times than I can count." He knew she would try something like this. I felt a chill. He didn't need to explain further. I already understood. Dad had anticipated betrayal. Every step, every move, every deception. I sat down, the leather chair creaking under my weight. He left me a letter," I said, handing him the envelope. "Ah," he said, nodding knowingly. "I was wondering when you'd find that." He gestured toward a small cabinet and pulled out a file thicker than my forearm. "Your father was meticulous. Every scenario accounted for. Diane, as clever as she thinks she is, left plenty of traces." I leaned forward, trying to process his words. "Traces?" I asked. "You mean evidence?" "Yes," he replied. "But more than that. He wanted to teach a lesson, Daniel. Not just about property, but about character, greed, and justice." He opened the file, revealing a collection of documents, letters, and photographs. "He called this his safety net," Mr. Harris said. "He knew the house meant more to you than just money. It was legacy, memory, a connection to him. And he wasn't about to let her erase that." Every document I looked at confirmed what I had begun to realize on my own. Every signature, every clause, every legal loophole, all designed to catch her in the act. "Your father even predicted her exact moves," Mr. Harris continued. "The phone calls, the secret meetings, the rushed sale. He left warnings disguised as instructions and clues for you to follow." I felt a mix of awe and disbelief. Dad had been playing this long game, and I was finally stepping into his design. He handed me a small USB drive. "This contains every email, every transaction, every altered document she's ever tried to manipulate," he explained. He collected them silently, ensuring you'd have the tools to act when the time came. I couldn't help but marvel at the precision of it all. Dad's foresight wasn't just clever, it was masterful. Every detail had been laid out, waiting for me to find it. "But you must be careful," Mr. Harris warned. "She's unpredictable. She's confident now because she thinks she's won. That confidence is dangerous, but it also makes her vulnerable. Timing is everything." I nodded, absorbing every word. "So, what do I do first?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Observe. Gather more evidence if you need it. Let her believe she's in control. Your father left you all the legal leverage you could ever need. But the key is patience. She'll make the next move herself, and when she does, everything will fall into place." It was almost poetic the way he said it. The predator becomes the prey. The thief underestimates the one she betrayed. I left Mr. Harris's office feeling a mix of empowerment and nervous anticipation. The plan wasn't mine. It was Dad's. I was just the executor. And somehow that thought made me feel closer to him. Back at the house, I started to look at Diane differently. Every phone call, every sudden meeting, every forced smile, all clues now. Dad had given me the tools to read her, to anticipate her, to prepare for what was coming. Later that evening, I reviewed the documents Mr. Harris had given me. Contracts, emails, even subtle notes my father had included in margins. They all painted a picture of meticulous preparation. There were instructions hidden in plain sight, steps that would allow me to reclaim the house legally while exposing Diane's deceit. One document caught my eye, a notarized letter that outlined a clause Diane hadn't noticed. If she continued with the sale, it would automatically void the transaction. Dad had built in a safety net. As I went through the file, I realized something important. This wasn't just about a house. It was about justice, about proving that greed and betrayal, no matter how carefully hidden, always leave traces. And my father had known this all along. That night, I sat in Dad's old study, the documents spread around me, the letter from him in my hand. I whispered into the empty room, "I understand now, Dad. I see your plan. I'll follow it. I won't fail you." The house, once a symbol of betrayal and loss, now felt like a battlefield. And I had been armed, not with anger, but with patience, strategy, and my father's wisdom. I realized the truth. Diane's confidence was her weakness. She had no idea that every move she made had been predicted. And that prediction was my advantage. I took a deep breath, looking around the house I had thought I'd lost forever. Every creak of the floor, every shadow on the walls, every memory in this house, all of it was part of my father's plan. He had trusted me to see it through, to act when the time was right. And I would, because this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about honoring my father's legacy, keeping his promises, and letting justice unfold exactly as he intended. The first part of the plan was clear. Observe. Wait. Let her make the next mistake. And when she did, everything would change. I smiled faintly, feeling the weight of responsibility and the thrill of impending justice. My father's backup plan was no longer a mystery. It was mine to execute, and Diane would soon discover that no betrayal, no matter how clever, could ever outsmart a father who had planned for everything. It was late at night when I finally sat down to piece it all together. The house was quiet, every creak and sigh of the old wood echoing like a memory of my father. For the first time since Diane sold the house, I felt clarity. I spread out all the documents, letters, and digital files Dad had left me. Every instruction, every note, every hidden clause, they weren't just legal safeguards. They were a blueprint for justice. Not revenge, justice. I traced the timeline Dad had laid out, step by step. He had predicted Diane's moves months in advance, the secret meetings with the mysterious man, the forged documents she would try to submit, her assumption that I would be powerless and overwhelmed. Every mistake she thought she was hiding was already accounted for in Dad's meticulous plan. He had created a path for me, a way to expose her greed without ever confronting her directly. The more I studied, the more I realized how clever it all was. Dad had not only hidden evidence of her deception, he had made it impossible for her to erase her tracks completely. Every phone call, every email, every transaction left a trail. And the hidden files, the letters, the clauses in the will, all of it funneled back to one inevitable outcome: Diane's exposure. It was almost poetic. The betrayal itself would be her undoing. I remembered the letter I had found, the one he said I wasn't supposed to see until the time was right. Let her reveal herself through her own choices. The truth will always come out if you wait. I understood now. Dad wasn't just protecting me. He was orchestrating a lesson in character, morality, and consequences. The house wasn't just property. It was the stage. Diane was the actor, and I was the executor of the final act. One document in particular caught my attention. A notarized clause stating that any unauthorized sale of the property would be automatically nullified if I, the rightful heir, had not approved it. It was subtle, hidden within pages of legal jargon that Diane had skimmed over. She thought she was clever, She thought she had outsmarted us. But Dad had anticipated every greedy assumption. Then I turned my attention to the digital files. Emails between Diane and her mysterious contact, drafts of the fake contracts she had planned to submit, bank transfers, all lined up like pieces of a puzzle. Every piece proved her intent. Every piece confirmed the betrayal. And every piece was a weapon, not for revenge, but for justice. I realized something important. I didn't need to fight her. I didn't need to confront her. All I had to do was wait and let the truth unfold. The letters also revealed another layer, a network of trusted allies Dad had lined up in advance. Lawyers, accountants, friends who understood his methods. They were ready to step in quietly to enforce the plan when the time came. Dad had thought of everything: the emotional trap, the legal safeguards, and even the timing. I felt a wave of awe wash over me. I had always known my father was clever. But this was genius. I began to piece together how it would play out. Diane would continue believing she had won. Her own actions would leave evidence of deception. When the right moment came, I, guided by Dad's instructions, would activate the plan. The legal safeguards, combined with the evidence she unknowingly provided, would ensure justice. And most importantly, she would never see it coming. I smiled, a cold, determined smile. She had underestimated me. She had underestimated my father. And in doing so, she had set the stage for her own undoing. The thought was almost satisfying, but I reminded myself this wasn't about satisfaction. It was about justice. And justice, Dad had taught me, was silent, precise, and inevitable. That night, I walked through the empty halls of the house, touching the walls, the doors, the floors. Everything felt different now. The house was no longer a symbol of loss. It was a battlefield, and I held the map. I revisited the notes from Mr. Harris, reread Dad's letters, and carefully reviewed every file again. I created a timeline, a strategy, and a mental checklist, all designed to ensure that when Diane's next move came, I would be ready. I realized the brilliance of Dad's backup plan. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about punishment. It was about exposing greed, teaching a lesson, and ensuring that truth and justice prevailed. Every manipulation, every hidden clause, every overlooked detail was designed to bring out her true nature. And I would be the one to reveal it. The next morning, I watched Diane move through the house, confident as ever. She thought she had won. She thought she had erased my father's legacy. But I was ready. Every call she made, every meeting she attended, every step she took, all were predictable. All were pieces of the puzzle Dad had left for me to complete. As I stood by the study window, looking at the sun reflecting off the driveway, I whispered, "Thank you, Dad. I understand now. Your plan, it's perfect, and I'll see it through." I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel helpless. I felt prepared. Diane would discover soon enough that greed always leaves a trace. That betrayal always carries consequences, and that my father's plan, silent, patient, and brilliant, would not fail. The stage was set. The players were in position, and the final act was approaching. The air in the house felt different that morning. Not quiet, not still, but electric, charged with anticipation. I moved through the rooms carefully, almost reverently, as if the walls themselves were watching, waiting for what was about to unfold. Every document, every hidden clause, every instruction my father had left me suddenly felt alive. The plan was no longer abstract. It was real. And Diane had no idea she was walking straight into it. I had spent days observing her routine, noting her calls, her visitors, and her habitual confidence. Every step she took was predictable, exactly as Dad had anticipated. I knew when she would check her emails, when she would leave the house, and even the exact time she would pour herself a cup of coffee in the kitchen. Patience, Dad had said, was the weapon of the wise. And I had it. It started with the files. I quietly uploaded every document, every email, every minor discrepancy Diane had created, into a secure legal account set up through Mr. Harris. It was invisible to her, just digital shadows, silent and undetectable. Then I left small hints in her path, things she would notice but dismiss. A folder accidentally left on the table. A phone call missed by my timing. A subtle slip that would make her think she was being watched, without knowing she was walking straight into the truth. By evening, Diane's confidence was palpable. She moved through the house as though she had already won. She checked her emails, sorted her papers, and even called her mysterious contact, laughing lightly at some inside joke I would never hear. But I knew the cracks were forming. Every overconfident move she made was feeding the trap Dad had designed. I followed his instructions meticulously. Not a single step taken out of order, not a single hint ignored. I waited in shadows, observed and documented, all silently, all deliberately. Then came the first mistake. Diane, in her haste and self-assuredness, had accidentally left a key document on the kitchen counter. It was a draft contract she believed would finalize the house sale. I picked it up quietly and slipped it into the folder Dad had highlighted for me, the one containing all the legal leverage I would need. I watched her from the doorway, pretending to be absorbed in a book. She returned to the kitchen moments later, her brow furrowed in confusion. "I could have sworn I left it here," she muttered. Her voice carried a trace of anxiety now, subtle, almost imperceptible, but there. I smiled faintly. The first threads of the trap were closing. Next came the legal maneuver. I submitted the notarized clause my father had highlighted, the one that would automatically void the sale because I had never approved it. It was a small move, silent, invisible, but monumental. Diane thought she had already succeeded. She had no idea that every action she had taken was now being countered in ways she couldn't see. As the night deepened, tension built in the house. The shadows felt alive. The walls seemed to hum with anticipation. And I knew she could feel it too, even if she didn't realize why. She began pacing the living room, phone in hand, muttering to herself about the paperwork, the lawyers, the sale. I watched, silent and patient, as the trap continued to take shape. The moment of poetic justice arrived unexpectedly. Diane tried to log into the digital accounts she thought controlled the house sale. But every login failed, every access denied. Panic flickered across her face. She didn't understand that her own greed, her own overconfidence had set the stage. Every document, every clause, every hidden instruction Dad had left me now worked in perfect harmony to expose her. She rushed to the living room desk, rifling through papers, her hands trembling. What is happening?" she whispered. I stepped out of the shadows, calm, collected, holding the letters and files Dad had entrusted me with. "Seems like the house isn't yours to sell," I said softly. Her eyes widened, a mix of shock and anger. She looked at me, as though realizing for the first time that the world she had tried to control was slipping through her fingers. This can't be real," she stammered. It was real. Every signature, every clause, every hidden contingency Dad had laid down was coming into effect. The trap was closing. Over the next hour, the tension escalated. Diane tried to call her mysterious contact. I followed every step silently, letting her believe she was navigating the storm. But every move she made only tightened the web Dad had woven. When she finally realized that the sale had been voided, that the house legally belonged to me, and that her own actions had provided proof of deceit, her confidence shattered. The look on her face, a mixture of fear, disbelief, and bitter regret, was the first real satisfaction I had allowed myself. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. Every detail Dad had planned, every patient instruction, had culminated in this moment. Poetic justice. The betrayal had carried its own consequence. I walked through the house after the storm had settled, touching the familiar walls. It felt different now. Not empty. Not hollow. Alive with the presence of truth and the wisdom of my father. Dad had taught me many things, but most importantly, patience, observation, and justice always outlast greed. As Diane left the house, defeated and exposed, I felt a calm settle over me. The trap had worked. The lesson had been delivered. And my father's legacy, the house, the plan, the wisdom, was preserved, intact. I realized something then. True justice isn't loud. It isn't vengeful. It is deliberate, precise, and inevitable. And Dad had made sure it was mine to enact. That night, I sat in the study, reading Dad's letter one last time. Let her reveal herself. Let truth prevail. Daniel, your patience is your power. I smiled, finally understanding the full weight of his words. The trap was set. The plan had unfolded perfectly. And in that quiet, victorious moment, I felt closer to my father than I ever had before. The morning light streamed through the windows, but it didn't feel like a normal day. It felt heavy, expectant, like the world was holding its breath for something inevitable. I watched Diane move through the house, the weight of uncertainty finally creeping into her steps. She was no longer the confident, untouchable figure she had been. Her smirk was gone, replaced by a tense, nervous energy. The trap Dad had designed was now fully in motion, and she could sense it. The first indication of her unraveling came when she attempted to finalize the house sale one last time. Her calls went unanswered. Every login failed. Every signature she tried to use was invalid. Her panic was subtle at first, a shake in her hand, a flicker in her eyes. But it grew quickly, like a storm breaking after months of calm. I watched from the doorway, silent and calm, as she realized the truth. Her victory was nothing more than an illusion. I held the letters, the files, and the digital evidence my father had left me. Each piece had been meticulously arranged to ensure this moment, the ultimate reckoning. She looked at me, voice trembling. Daniel, this isn't possible. I did everything legally. I shook my head gently, the weight of my father's wisdom guiding me. Everything you did was exactly what Dad predicted. Every action, every lie, every attempt to take what wasn't yours. It's all here. The truth doesn't lie, Diane, and the law doesn't bend for greed. Her face paled as she realized the magnitude of her mistakes. She had underestimated not just me, but my father's foresight and the power of patience. Word began to spread. Mr. Harris, the lawyer who had silently guided me, contacted the relevant parties. Accounts were frozen, contracts were voided, and Diane's attempts to cover her tracks were revealed in undeniable clarity. Neighbors, friends, even distant family members began to hear whispers. Diane had no way to escape the truth. It wasn't dramatic or violent. It was silent, precise, and absolute. The law, guided by my father's plan, had done what anger or confrontation never could. I walked through the house, retracing steps Diane had taken, the rooms now echoing with a different energy. The house was no longer a symbol of betrayal. It was a monument to truth, to patience, to justice. Every document Dad had left, every clause, every hidden instruction had worked exactly as intended. And Diane had become a prisoner of her own overconfidence. Her confrontation with Mr. Harris was quiet but devastating. She tried to argue, to explain, to manipulate. But every point she made was countered by evidence, by law, and by the meticulous plan Dad had left for me to execute. She could no longer hide. She could no longer claim victory. She was exposed in front of everyone, her deceit, her greed, and her betrayal laid bare. I stayed in the background, letting the truth speak for itself. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to confront her directly. Her downfall was inevitable. And it was poetic. Every person who had once trusted her, admired her, or feared her saw the same thing I had known for weeks. Diane's triumph had been a mirage. The moment of reckoning reached its emotional peak when I gathered the family in the living room. I read aloud the letters my father had left, the hidden clauses and the instructions he had prepared. Every word carried weight. Every phrase illuminated the truth. Every detail reminded us all of his wisdom, foresight, and love. Diane could only sit, pale and speechless, as the truth unfolded in front of everyone. I could see the guilt, fear, and regret etched on her face. She had tried to steal a legacy, destroy a family's trust, and erase a father's memory. And yet, all her actions had become the evidence that led to her exposure. It was a strange feeling, not triumph, not hatred, but closure. Finally, the pain of betrayal was met with resolution. Finally, the lessons Dad had left me. patience, observation, justice had come full circle. After everything was settled, I walked through the house alone. Every room, every hallway, every familiar corner whispered memories of my father. And I felt a strange calm. The trap had worked. The plan had succeeded. Justice had been delivered, not through anger, not through confrontation, but through the silent, deliberate unfolding of truth. That evening, as the sun set over the property my father had loved, I held his letter once more. Daniel, let the truth prevail. Let patience guide your actions. Your strength lies not in anger, but in wisdom. I smiled, feeling a deep connection to him, as if he were standing right beside me. The house was finally mine, not just in ownership but in spirit. And Diane's reckoning served as a reminder of what my father had always taught. Greed can hide, but it cannot escape the light of truth. I walked outside, the cool evening air brushing my face. For the first time since Dad passed, I felt free. The betrayal, the uncertainty, and the pain had all led to this moment. Justice had been served. Truth had emerged victorious. And my father's legacy, patient, careful, brilliant, lived on through me. The house was quiet now. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of betrayal, but a calm, almost sacred stillness. I wandered through the rooms, each one echoing with memories of my father, his lessons, and the careful plan he had left behind. It was strange how empty spaces could feel so full of wisdom, full of love, and full of truth. I sat in Dad's study, the letter I had discovered weeks ago resting gently in my hands. Reading it again, I understood more than ever the depth of his intentions. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about exposing Diane's greed, though that was part of it. It was about teaching a lesson, one he hoped I would carry for the rest of my life. Daniel, he had written, love and honesty always outlast greed. Patience is your greatest strength. Observe, reflect, and let the truth do its work. The words echoed in my mind. Every step of the plan, every letter, every hidden clause, every instruction to Mr. Harris had been guided by that principle. Dad had wanted me to see that justice wasn't about anger. It wasn't about revenge. It was about letting the truth, carried by careful observation and patience, shine brighter than deception ever could. I thought about Diane, the stepmom who had believed she could take what wasn't hers, who had plotted, schemed, and acted out of greed. And yet she hadn't been destroyed by me. She had been undone by her own choices. Poetic justice, Dad had called it. And it had unfolded exactly as he intended. Walking through the house, I noticed the small details Dad had left for me to remember him by. A framed photo on the mantel, his favorite pen in the drawer, a notebook of his thoughts tucked neatly on the shelf. It struck me then that this entire experience wasn't just about property or betrayal. It was about legacy. It was about understanding the weight of our actions, the value of integrity, and the power of patience. I reflected on the moments I had shared with Dad over the years. The quiet mornings in the kitchen, the long walks where he spoke in gentle, measured tones, the lessons hidden in casual advice. Daniel, people will show you who they are. Watch closely, listen carefully, and always act with honesty, even when others do not. I realized that the house, the letters, the legal intricacies, all of it was a continuation of that same lesson. Dad had orchestrated a final teaching, not with words, but with events, with life itself. Sitting by the window, I watched the sun set over the property. Its warm light reflected off the windows, bathing the rooms in a golden glow. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt peace. The betrayal, the tension, the heartbreak, all had led to clarity. All had led to understanding. I understood now what Dad had wanted most. To teach me that integrity and honesty, paired with patience and wisdom, are stronger than greed, deception, or haste. I thought about the future, about the house, now restored to its rightful place, but more importantly, about the lessons it represented. I knew Diane's choices would continue to have consequences, but I did not feel satisfaction in her failure. I felt gratitude that my father had given me the tools to see justice done, Gratitude that I had been trusted to carry forward his legacy, and above all, gratitude for understanding the moral he had woven into every detail of his plan. That night I walked through the rooms one last time, feeling the presence of my father in every corner. "I see now, Dad," I whispered. "The house, the letters, the plan. It was never about possessions. It was about values, about patience, integrity, and love. You wanted me to understand that love and honesty always outlast greed. And I do." The house, once a battlefield, now felt like home. Safe, warm, and alive with the lessons of the past. I thought of the moments I had doubted myself, moments of fear, anger, and hopelessness. Every one of them had been part of the journey. Every trial had led to this understanding. I realized that Dad's true gift wasn't the plan, the legal maneuvers, or even the house. His gift was wisdom, the kind of wisdom that shapes decisions, guides actions, and molds character. As night fell, I sat by the fireplace, the letter open in front of me. I let myself feel the full weight of it all, the grief of loss, the sting of betrayal, the satisfaction of justice, and the deep, abiding love that had guided every step. I closed my eyes and whispered a final thank you. "Thank you, Dad, for teaching me to see, to wait, and to act with integrity, for showing me that the right path may be long, but it always leads to truth." The lesson was clear. Greed may appear strong, but it is fragile. Deception may seem clever, but it always leaves traces. Love, honesty, and patience, these endure. These define legacy, and in that quiet, peaceful moment, I understood that my father had given me the greatest inheritance of all. Not a house, not money, not even letters, but the wisdom to navigate life with integrity, and the courage to uphold truth no matter the cost. The house stood still outside, bathed in moonlight. Silent, proud, a testament to justice and love. And I knew that as long as I remembered Dad's lessons, I would carry forward not just a home, but a legacy of patience, wisdom, and moral courage. Because in the end, that was what he had always wanted me to know. Love and honesty always outlast greed. And now I truly understood.